Well, that breaking news right now. A verdict has been reached in former Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby's fraud trial. This was the first full day of deliberations for the jury after nearly 2 weeks of testimony.
The jury handed down its verdict about 30 minutes ago or so. Marilyn Mosby guilty on count 2 in this case.
All right, to understand Marilyn Mosby, you have to understand Freddie Gray. Now, Freddie Gray was George Floyd before George Floyd. In 2015, Freddie Gray died in police custody, and it sparked massive protests in the city of Baltimore. Here's some video.
Police say Gray ran from police who pursued him, arresting him, as this video shows, at 8:39. Just 4 minutes later, at 8:43, is when he's put into that police van, and he asks for an inhaler. At 8:46, the van driver says he gets irate. They pull over, and leg irons are put on. A medic isn't called until 9:24. Gray is then hospitalized.
So when everything was said and done, the conclusion was that Gray's injuries occurred in the van, in the police van that he was put into. Now, there was someone else in that police van when Freddie Gray was there. Here's what he had to say.
I'm Dante Allen. I am the one that was in the van with Freddie Gray.
The one who the police commissioner calls the second prisoner in the van.
The second prisoner that was picked up is that he didn't see any harm done to Freddie at all. What he has said is that he heard Freddie thrashing about.
But Dante wants to get something straight.
All it did was go straight to the station, but I heard a little banging that was like he was banging his head.
He tells WJZ he's angry about an internal police report published in the Washington Post.
And they trying to make it seem like I told them that, you know what I mean, that Freddie Gray did that to himself. Why the would he do that to himself?
Dante Allen was in this van because he allegedly stole a cigarette from this store on North Avenue. He was never charged. Instead, he was brought straight downtown.
I talked to Homicide. I told Homicide the same story.
A story he says is being distorted.
Now, we have an eyewitness who was in the van where Freddie Gray was allegedly injured. And he's saying he didn't witness any police beatings or anything like that. He did hear his head hitting against the wall or something like that, or him thrashing around, which may have caused his injuries. But this person who was in the van at the time says he didn't see the police do anything crazy or improper. Now, this wasn't enough to stop massive protests in Baltimore, where the governor even had to declare a state of emergency.
Tonight, we have witnessed lawlessness and chaos on the streets as the violence escalates despite calls for peace. All this in the wake of today's funeral for a young man who died of severe injuries while in police custody. Baltimore is burning. After a day of looting and rioters clashing violently with police, tonight a community center in flames lights up the city as police and community activists try and take back the streets.
Let it shine in my neighborhood.
Lost to chaos earlier today. Rioters armed with gas masks, appearing ready for a fight. The police force under siege, at least 15 officers injured. The mayor taking to the streets tonight to condemn those responsible.
So with people begging for justice in the streets, burning down the city, Marilyn Mosby made the hard, tough decision to charge the officers with murder and manslaughter.
The findings of our comprehensive, thorough, and independent investigation, coupled with the medical examiner's determination that Mr. Gray's death was a homicide, which we received today, has led us to believe that we have probable cause to file criminal charges.
On Friday, Mosby charged 6 officers with at least 3 counts each and declared her city's cops illegally arrested Gray on April 12th. Mosby alleged the officers ignored Gray's pleas for help at least 5 times and put him on his stomach head first into a police van for the ride to the police station without a seatbelt on. Baltimore residents took to the streets in jubilation after the surprise announcement, with police and riot gear standing calmly nearby.
So now it seems like all is right with the world. The cops are charged with murder and manslaughter, and the protests have stopped in the streets. But there was a pesky thing they needed to go through, which was a trial. And at a trial, you need to provide evidence. And unfortunately, all the evidence was bad for the prosecutor. See, the prosecutor's whole case hinged on the fact that the police allegedly knew that Freddie Gray was in medical distress and didn't do anything. and didn't help him and left him in that state, and eventually he died, making them responsible for his death. But remember earlier when I showed you that eyewitness who was actually in the back with Freddie Gray?
I'm Dante Allen. I am the one that was in the van with Freddie Gray.
The one who the police commissioner calls the second prisoner in the van.
The second prisoner that was picked up is that he didn't see any harm done to Freddie at all. What he has said is that he heard Freddie thrashing about.
So this witness is really damaging to the prosecution's case because their case hinges on the fact that the cops were extremely reckless by leaving Freddie Gray in the back. But you also have a witness who's back in the back of the van with Freddie Gray who's saying that it didn't seem like he was in need of any type of medical assistance. He wasn't suffering from a medical emergency. Now, that would essentially make this negligence, right? They didn't properly put him in the back of the van and he died, so it's negligence, but that wouldn't make it criminal. So with that said, 3 of the officers were acquitted of war on all counts, and the other 3, the charges were 100% dismissed because the prosecution never had a case to begin with.
Jeff, I have to ask, it seems that Baltimore's reaction to the verdict has been pretty muted so far. Is that the case?
Well, that is the case. There were smaller protests earlier. You see here outside City Hall, maybe you can see the barricades behind me, but there were no protesters here earlier today. So yes, overall, the reaction to this verdict has been muted.
It seems that that's been the case the last couple of trials. How will this verdict influence the 4 remaining trials now?
Well, look at these cases this way. It's like a link, a chain link. And if there is a lack of evidence in one case and the link drops out, well, then that can affect the cases down the line. So that's what we're hearing about this decision by this judge. This could have ramifications. It could really influence the trials to come.
This was supposed to be one of the bigger cases. Some critics say the trials here were rushed, Jeff. Is there any validity to that?
Well, that's what you hear a lot around here from supporters, certainly of the police officers who feel that Marilyn Mosby, who's the city's top prosecutor, rushed to judgment in this case and really rushed the results of the investigation without really considering the ramifications. And so there is talk around here that perhaps there was this rush to judgment because when you look at these cases and how they've come together, there has been a common theme. And at times this theme is that there is a lack of evidence in one case, a lack of evidence in another case. And so there are concerns that perhaps this was a case that was, or these cases were rushed.
Now, here is Marilyn Mosby dismissing all the charges against all the other officers because she had no evidence that they were guilty of anything.
For those that believe that I'm anti-police, it's simply not the case. I'm anti-police brutality. And I need not remind you that the only loss and the greatest loss in all of this was that of Freddie Gray's life. We do not believe that Freddie Gray killed himself. We stand by the medical examiner's determination that Freddie Gray's death was a homicide. However, after much thought and prayer, it has become clear to me that without being able to work with an independent investigatory agency from the very start, without having a say in the election of whether our cases proceed in front of a judge or a jury, without communal oversight of policing in this community, without real substantive reforms to the current criminal justice system, we could try this case 100 times and cases just like it, and we would still end up with the same result. Accordingly, I have decided not to proceed on the cases against Officer Garrett, Sergeant Alicia White, or to relitigate the case against William Porter.
You know she's thinking, I hope they didn't hear me. So with no evidence, the case was dismissed. But then some interesting stuff came out about the chief prosecutor.
All right, we have more breaking news right now. Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby has been indicted.
WJZ investigator Mike Halgren is live with more details. Mike.
Lynn, Denise, we are still reviewing that indictment. I was just looking through it, 19 pages. It is signed by the U.S. Attorney in Maryland. It appears that there are charges of perjury and making a false statement on a loan application for taking a COVID-19 hardship withdrawal from a 401k account. Again, we are still reviewing the document, but it appears there are multiple charges against Marilyn Mosby. This indictment was brought with the assistance of a grand jury. Marilyn Mosby has long denied any wrongdoing. From the start of this, we know that she has been under investigation by the federal government for some time now. We were unsure whether there would be any charges. Again, Marilyn Mosby has denied any wrongdoing in previous statements, but it appears that she has been indicted on several charges, including perjury and making false statements when trying to obtain a loan.
So this thing doesn't get too confusing. Here's a timeline of what happened.
In January of 2022, Marilyn Mosby, Baltimore's top prosecutor at the time, was indicted by a federal grand jury on charges of perjury and making false mortgage applications. 9 months later, in September of 2022, Mosby's trial was pushed back. This was the first of several delays that would come over the next year. This first delay was in connection to an expert witness, and it was following Mosby's loss in the Democratic primary in her attempt to remain in position as Baltimore City State's attorney. In January of this year, there was a surprising twist in Mosby's case when a judge allowed her entire defense team to withdraw. The judge then appointed a public defender to represent Mosby. This resulted in another delay in the trial. And finally, this past September, Mosby's defense attorney scored a major victory when they got her federal trial moved out of Baltimore and split into two cases, one for perjury, the other for mortgage fraud.
So Marilyn Mosby went to trial twice, first on the perjury charge, and the jury found her guilty as charged.
Marilyn Mosby's perjury trial centered on allegations she lied, saying COVID impacted her Mahogany Elite travel business so she could withdraw thousands of dollars from her retirement account, penalty-free, to buy 2 vacation homes in Florida. And while jurors never heard Mosby testify, they did hear her voice in several recorded phone calls with her retirement plan's customer service as she tried to get the money.
Yeah, I need the emergency withdrawal option, right? Like if you have that written out, because I have the document that is from the fund withdrawal and payout options, and in it specifies that you may withdraw funds when you, and it gives you 3 different scenarios. But the second one is really what my mortgage, the underwriter for the lending agency is looking for. Experience a qualifying unforeseeable emergency that will cause you severe financial hardship.
Prosecutors alleged Mahogany Elite was a sham, that Mosby never intended to operate it and never took on a single client.
Now I'm in a situation where I need this money, and I'm trying to figure out if there's anything that I can do in order to start the process and to get it.
You haven't submitted a form for the COVID paperwork?
No, I can do that. I can do that right now. And I had a very lengthy conversation with the representative who explained to me what my options were. He told me about the CARES Act provision, and he explained to me what my deadline was if, in fact, I needed to take out additional money.
The jury came into the courtroom. The judge took a poll. They said they were going to have the foreperson speak for them, and the foreperson presented the verdict sheet to the court clerk. The court clerk read the verdict, again guilty on 2 counts of perjury for Marilyn Mosby. And this stems from statements that she made to get a penalty-free COVID withdrawal from her retirement account in Baltimore City.
So now, facing 10 years for perjury, she was also then found guilty again last week. Check it out.
A verdict has been reached in former Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby's fraud trial.
Huge fall from grace for the one-time state's attorney for the city of Baltimore who served 2 terms to be convicted now of 1 count of mortgage fraud. She was convicted of perjury back in November for withdrawals that she made from her retirement fund that were inappropriate. She blamed COVID-19, said she could have a hardship withdrawal. Well, jurors found that that was a lie. So she was found guilty then. She was found guilty today.
Okay, so that's the curious cases of Marilyn Mosby, former top state's attorney, now going to prison for mortgage fraud and perjury. Talk about a fall, right? And, you know, it's with the Freddie Gray case. I kind of think she's getting what she deserved? Because in that case, she put those cops through hell and had no evidence to charge them or anything. Now she's probably going to lose her law license. Now she's lost her freedom. And it's weird how everything kind of works itself out. But with that said, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to all the great YouTube stuff. My name is Ethan Lawyer, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.